Hello, everyone. Very good to see everybody in the room today. This is the first seminar paper of our online seminar for the Genaut project in Vienna, focused on the literature around the early Christian characters that are said to have met one apostle. And our first speaker today is Marianna Cerno, an Italian scholar based in Udine, who has worked broadly on Latin, late antique and early medieval literature. She has published broadly on various topics and in manuscript works, and she has also published 2 books on Chromatio of Aquileia, including a critical edition, translation, and commentary of the sermons. But today she'll be speaking about a new text around Clement of Rome, and on which she already published a couple of articles, and for which she is preparing now a critical edition. Marianna, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, and I would like to thank Dan Bartovich for the invitation. I will share a presentation. Okay. The Gesta sancti Clementis is an unknown and very complex fragment found in a manuscript kept in Split, Croatia, and its edition, with Italian translation and an introductory presentation, is currently in print. It will be published in 2026. Today, I will provide a concise overview of the discovery, the content of the fragment, and some of the most significant elements of the text, with particular reference to the comparison to Rufinus' Recognitiones. I will then address the complex issue of the double authorship and the text multifaceted editorial status. This will provide a comprehensive understanding of this stunning fragment. As you will see, it is challenging to convey even this limited amount of selected information within a 25-minute time frame. I will endeavor to be as clear as possible. The discovery of Gesta sancti Clementis was fortuitous. My research focuses on hagiography, with a particular emphasis on the production of areas of Aquileia in the northern Adriatic Sea and Salona, near Split in Dalmatia, in the eastern Adriatic. For this reason, I was looking for a Vita Clementis that would have provided information about the declared apostolic origin of the episcopal see of Salona, citing the Apostle Andronicus, a question well known to scholars of ecclesiastical history. This Vita Clementis is mentioned by Daniele Farlati, an 18th century Jesuit responsible for a monumental work in 8 volumes devoted to Dalmatian antiquities entitled Illyricum Sacrum. In this work, Farlati presents 2 lives of Clement, both of which are in a fragmentary state, and transcribes some passages. I thought I had found the life that also mentioned the Apostle Andronicus, but instead I found the other one. The passages cited by Farlati correspond to a part of the text I found. However, this Vita Clementis, entitled Gesta sancti Clementis in the manuscript, as you can see, does not conform to the usual hagiographic structure. While the beginning may resemble one of the numerous life of saints that have circulated in Latin since late antiquity, it soon transforms into a text comparable to a late antique novel, in which a narrator recounts the adventurous events of Clement and his family. A comparison can be made with the most famous Latin novel on Clement, De Recognitiones, translated from the Greek by Rufinus to the beginning of the 5th century. The Recognitiones begin with a soliloquy by Clement, recounting his arrival in Judea and his life alongside Peter. Gradually, Clement recollects the events that had caused the rift with various members of his family, whom he then encounters one by one in Caesarea with Peter's assistance. The Gesta sancti Clementis provide comprehensive account of the initial events of this saga. They start with the introduction of Clement's parents and the omens and portents that precede the birth of the protagonist. The narrative continues with the account of Clement's childhood and a detailed and gripping exposition of the passion towards Matidia, Clement's mother, from her brother-in-law, and their subsequent escape with the twins, Clement's elder brothers, for the sake of the family. In summary, Clement's uncle, Matidia's brother-in-law, deceives his own brother, Clement's father, about Matidia's love. However, Clement's father sets out to find her and the twins who have been shipwrecked and scattered in the East. The narrative depicts Clement's internal conflict. Following Barnabas' sermons in Rome, he decided to accompany him to meet Jesus in Judea and ascertain his family fate. The preparation and journey are then described. Since Clement's father is a friend and a relative of the Emperor Tiberius, I should say Tiberius, but I'll say in Latin, this writes a letter to ensure that Clement is welcomed and satisfied in his request, finding Jesus. Clement's destination is not Caesarea, as indicated in Rufinus Recognitiones, but rather Jerusalem, and the recipient of this letter is the governor Pontius Pilatus. Upon seeing Clement and reading the emperor's recommendation, Pilate was terrified. The crucifixion of Jesus had taken place just 1 month earlier. Claudia Procula, Pilate's wife, and a secret convert to Christianity, takes charge of the situation. She prepares her husband's nocturnal escape, and once satisfied of Clement's goodness, she regrets that the young man did not arrive a month earlier. In conversation with Clement, Procula begins her account from the Annunciation and the miraculous birth of Jesus. Here, the fragment ends abruptly, in a sort of paraphrase of the Gospels of Luke and Matthew, combined with apocryphal material. As you can see, the plot is intricate and meticulous in its detail. A notable feature is the interspersing of text, such as the exchange of letters between Tiberius and Pilate, which belong to the category of apocryphal texts. These insertions testify a correspondence between the two characters made up by epistles that differ from those already known to us. Similarly, in the section detailing the preaching of Barnabas, the letter of Lentulus is incorporated. This letter, which describes the appearance of Jesus, is considered as a late medieval apocryphal text, but again, the text included in the Gesta sancti Clementis is different. In a study published in 2021 in the journal Apocrypha, I examined the entire manuscript tradition of Epistola Lentuli, demonstrating the earlier date of the text included in the Gesta compared to the known version of the letter. Moreover, this version must be dated a century earlier than what has been acquired by studies so far. Another intriguing apocryphal element of the text concerns a character who, although minor, plays a pivotal role. In Recognitiones, we read about a philosopher, a family friend, from whom Clement seeks counsel on the prospect of questioning a necromancer in Egypt. In the Gesta sancti Clementis, this figure is the distinguished philosopher Seneca, portrayed as a close friend and study companion of Clement, a figure of great significance in the text. This tradition is also completely unknown, and I began to study it keeping in mind what is known about another similar tradition, rather mysterious and little known, the correspondence between Seneca and the Apostle Paul. There are just some of the major arguments included in this fragment, and each deserves a long study. It is also important to note the reference to theology, mentality, and material culture that emerge from the text. To summarize, further research is required on the Gesta. For the introduction to the edition in print, I have undertaken some of these investigations. In the time available today, it is worthwhile to focus on the section of the text that can be compared synoptically with Rufinus' Recognitiones. In the manuscript, the Gesta sancti Clementis are divided into 5 chapters, which I have further subdivided into paragraphs in order to facilitate the construction of the apparatus in the critical edition. Each chapter comprises between 20 and 25 paragraphs. The section of the Gesta that extends from the middle of the 3rd chapter to the beginning of the 4th chapter is approximately the length of 1 chapter out of the 5 transmitted. This section can be followed synoptically with the beginning of Rufinus' Recognitiones, the first 7 paragraphs of the 1st chapter. Recognitiones begin with an address in the 1st person by Clement. I think here, who shares his personal reflection on a range of profound topics, including the world, existence, death, time, and humanity's fate after death. He recounts how this contemplation afflicted him, propelling him to delve into the various philosophies of his era. Eventually, driven by a sense of dissatisfaction, he contemplates traveling to Egypt to seek counsel from hierophants and necromancers. However, a philosopher, a close family friend, persuaded him against this course of action, until a rumor began to circulate in Rome. An announcement came from the East, and he happened to hear Barnabas in Rome. Let us now consider how the Gesta sancti Clementis present this part. In the Gesta, the passage begins with the narrator speaking in the 3rd person, recounting more or less the same things that in Recognitiones Clement says in 1st person. Following this section, the Gesta presents a further part of Clement's reflection, which is not included in Recognitiones. This passage is explicitly dedicated to the pagan gods and the origin of these deities, and of the world as a whole. It poses the question of why, if a positive force governs the universe, this is then entrusted to violent and immoral gods. After these specifications, the synoptic reading of the 2 works is again possible from the 2nd paragraph of the Recognitiones until the middle of the 5th. In this part, Clement speaks of his desire for immortality, the study of the philosophy of the time, and now this desire led him to find the true light. I would like to highlight 2 points regarding this particular segment. In the Recognitiones, the indication of the study of philosophical school is generic, whereas in the Gesta, the cities where Clement goes to study philosophies are named, not only Rome, but also Athens and Durres. Furthermore, this paragraph marks a transition to the 1st person in the Gesta. The narrator presents Clement's thoughts as if in a soliloquy, which in the Gesta begins with the section corresponding to the 4th paragraph of the Recognitiones, as you can see. This is an interesting fact, because it can be seen as an indication of the Gesta's prior existence to Recognitiones. It would seem illogical for any author confronted with the text in the 1st person to change it into the 3rd person in its 1st part, thus impoverishing the text not only for the rhetorical effect, but also of the speaker's authority. Returning to comparison, we note some differences in the section of the text corresponding to the 5th paragraph of the Recognitiones, which deals with Clement's reflection on the immortality of the soul. The Recognitiones present a generic discourse on truth, while the Gesta sancti Clementis provide a comprehensive overview of the philosopher perspective, highlighting the pivotal role of Clement's aunt Demetrias in shaping the young man's moral compass. the time, Demetrius urged Seneca to guide Clement in the pursuit of moral integrity and legal compliance. The two works can then be synoptically read up to the end of the 5th paragraph of the Recognitiones. The Gesta concludes this section with a third-person passage. This. The narrator asserts that he has acquired this information through reliable testimonies, substantiated by letters from trustworthy individuals or written attestation, that is, authored works. Additionally, he provides the indication of the time in which these specific events took place, which was the consulship of Appius Iunius Silanus and Publius Silius Nerva, that is to say for us the year 28. It is important to emphasize this aspect of the Gesta. The narration aims to provide a specific and precise chronology of Clement's life. This is intended to establish a connection between this character and both the historical figure of Jesus and the parallel Roman history. In this regard, the narrator adheres closely to two primary sources, Velleius Paterculus and Tacitus. I recall that Velleius is favorable to Tiberius. In less frequent instances, and with a focus on the history of Judea during the period of Roman rule, the author aligns with the accounts of Josephus, Flavius Josephus. The introduction to the edition in print includes a section on the use of sources in the fragment. Continuing our synoptic reading, we look at chapter 4 of the Gesta. That is 6th paragraph of chapter 1 of the Recognitiones. This section discusses two significant events. Firstly, the new good announcement. Good announcement is a direct translation in Latin of the Greek Evangelion, which spreads from the east. And secondly, the arrival of Barnabas in Rome. We are approaching the end of the section that can be read in parallel. This part is very interesting. Here we find the letter of Lentulus on Jesus' physical appearance and presence, which includes his penetrating gaze, thaumaturgy, and serious demeanor, despite the odd display of weeping. As mentioned, I analyzed this letter and its medieval version. A second article focused on Jesus' iconography will be published in the near future. It was cut from the first publication due to its length. At the conclusion of the synoptical section, Barnabas' speech in Gesta sancti Clementis shows a part absent from Recognitiones. Scholars have noted that this omission in Recognitiones creates suspense regarding Barnabas' speech. The apostle speaks of heavenly reward after death, but not of eternal damnation. This part we find instead in Gesta sancti Clementis and also in the Epistle of Barnabas. Finally, I will focus on one last passage of the synoptic part, in which Barnabas is introduced by name and with a few words. In the Recognitiones, Rufinus indicates only the provenance, nationality, and Barnabas' membership to the 72 disciples of Jesus. In the Gesta sancti Clementis, other names appear, which recur in the apostolic and disciple list studied by François Dolbeau. This is an additional element to be explored also because, and I'm giving you a quick preview, this short passage has a noteworthy parallel in the most ancient hagiography of Salona, and Salona is the place where Gesta sancti Clementis originated. Therefore, before addressing the question of the author, it is crucial to emphasize the numerous connections between Gesta sancti Clementis and ancient apocryphal literature, both within the Latin area and across the entire Mediterranean region. We shall now turn our attention to the question of authorship, which is equally complex. Gesta sancti Clementis are introduced by the prologue of an anonymous presbyter of Salona who is addressing his faithful. The presbyter states that he is undertaking a valuable task by providing a comprehensive account of Clement's life, a disciple and collaborator of the apostles. drawing upon the ancient and reliable testimonies held in the Church of Salona. This approach aligns closely with the beginning of Livy's work, underscoring the historical accuracy of the account. He maintains this view throughout the text. As discussed, he refers to trusted sources. The preserved fragment relies on a principal source, but the presbyter also mentions other works to confirm the same contents. The main source of the preserved fragment is a letter devoted not to Clement, but to his mother, Matidia, and the author is Hermagoras, Bishop of Aquileia. Despite the lack of information available on this work, it is important to note that recent scholarship within the last few years has highlighted the derivation of Clement's saga from a text or novel centered on the figure of his mother Matidia. Another noteworthy element is the mention of Hermagora, the first bishop of Aquileia. In fact, from the late 6th century until the late 19th century, when the historical critical reading of hagiography began, Hermagoras was considered a disciple of Peter through the evangelist Mark. This is a very particular and ancient tradition, which Paul the Deacon already speaks of at the end of the 8th century. A separate study I conducted, independent from the Gesta sancti Clementis and published in 2021, established the chronology of Hermagoras' hagiographic legend to the late 6th century. This sets a terminus ante quem for the Gesta sancti Clementis, because Hermagoras is not presented as a contemporary of Clement. This would undoubtedly have been emphasized to provide historical context for the story and appeal to the public. Moreover, it should be noted that the name of the bishop and the toponym both draw on late antique nomenclatures, as used by Pliny the Elder and up to the 5th century, rather than the early medieval ones. Also, the term archiepiscopus is not used for Hermagoras, and even this is more vague in terms of dating, it is nevertheless interesting. These data are strong elements in support of the antiquity of the text, and when combined with numerous other elements, corroborate the hypothesis that this is a redaction prior to that of Rufinus. In the introduction to the edition in print, there is a discussion of many of these elements. As previously mentioned, many of them merit further investigation. However, it was necessary to provide an initial framework for the test and the hypothesis of dating. In conclusion, I would like to add some final data to complete this presentation. I will begin with the chronology of the manuscripts. We have 18th century copies made by the Jesuits who edited the Illyricum Sacrum, but the 2 lives of Clement mentioned by them were found by Szymon Koziczyk Benia, Bishop of Modrus, from year 1506. An orator of the 5th Lateran Council in the 2nd decade of the 16th century. A man of culture and translator, he was devoted to Dalmatian antiquities and authored works in Latin and Croatian. As a medievalist, I have approached the study of the Gesta aiming at identifying any potential forgery, whether medieval or modern. In addition, I am concurrently undertaking a comprehensive review of the materials collected by Benia due to my research in the field of Dalmatian hagiography. It would be lengthy to discuss this in detail now, but I can say that this does not seem possible that Benia forged the Gesta sancti Clementis because this method contradicts the rest of his work collecting Dalmatian antiquities. Furthermore, it appears improbable that a forger would create a text and incorporate fabricated apocrypha into it, rather than using existing ones, at least in part. In any event, all potential objections to the text authenticity have been dismissed on the basis of philological or contextual evidence so far. Furthermore, it should be noted that the Gesta sancti Clementis contain all those elements that scholars have only recently identified as components of the so-called Grundschrift, the writing that would have formed the basis and previous version from which the recognitions were derived. In addition, with regard to content and express values, Gesta sancti Clementis are more closely aligned with the Clementia, the Greek homilies, than with the Latin recognitiones. Another key point to mention is the attribution of the text to Bishop Ezekiel of Salona, as proposed by Begna. I'll be very brief and then I close. Ezekiel was a bishop at the beginning of the 5th century and corresponded with Augustine of Hippo. Only one letter has survived, preserved in Augustinian epistolary. Despite the abundance of biblical quotation, the style of this letter aligns compatibly with the prologue of our fragment. In contrast, in the reported account, our presbyter paraphrases and often abbreviates the Aquileian source, the letter of Hermagoras, explicitly warning the public. Therefore, a certain contamination of style is found in the body of the text, another feature that is very difficult to forge. In any case, even the dating of the historical figure of Hermagoras to the second half of the 3rd century proposed by the historians of Aquileian Christianity is compatible with these findings. As it is evident, there are a number of elements to consider. Finally, I would like to emphasize that the introduction to the forthcoming edition includes a section on a narratological analysis of the text. In this section, I show how the author's vision and the novel's purpose are to re-establish the mentality of Latin aristocrats, particularly women, from a Christian perspective. The preservation of what in ancient Latin culture and tradition is closest to and most in line with the Christian ethics is of the utmost importance. In this respect, Seneca is the ideal spokesperson, and Clement is presented as a sort of Christian Romulus, a new founder. To summarize, he is a symbolic character representing the new Roman way of thinking. He almost naturally guides the pagans towards the new religion through an already shared ethic, of which clementia is a key element. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for your paper, illuminating paper on a very little known text. We open now the arena to any sort of question or reaction or remark. And I'm happy to start off the conversation with a couple of questions. You mentioned that the Epistle of Barnabas at some point, is it used in any way in the text? Any sort of reference to it?
No, the epistle is not used, but the contents and the mentality and the character of Barnabas himself correspond to the one that emerges from the letter we know. We see a correspondence. Also,
So,
a correspondence between Clement and the epistle of Clement to the first epistle of Clement. We can find the same ideas, the same ethics. So the figures, it seems that the figures are designed on these important works,
so
having a
it's
look
not.
to these works.
Yes,
You
but
know
my
what I
question
mean?
is about if I can push a bit more the question on Barnabas. So normally in scholarship, people say that the Epistle of Barnabas and the ethos behind it differs a bit from the Barnabas that we find in Acts, which is one of the reasons for which the letter is considered pseudo-epigraphical, of course. Do you find in the text, in the Gesta, a bit of both? So a bit of Barnabas from the Acts and a bit of Barnabas from the letter. Do you know what I mean? I'm curious how you see this text.
Yes, how can I say, the features I noticed, how can I say, speak about a different consideration of the character of Barnabas that consider the entire knowledge, the all sources we have. It's like a different perspective, as if in how can I say, in a later period, it became narrower. And this also happened to Clement. The Clement we see in this fragment is 360 degrees. I don't know if I can explain well. The hagiographic Clement, we know about the Latin hagiography 1848, is something different, is something adapted to another mentality and other urgencies. Let me explain one more thing.
Please.
This fragment is, in my opinion, when you read this fragment, you can see the shared cultural tradition of the first centuries, where history and novels were part of the same ethical message. It's like prototype of what later hagiography becomes. I hope I can explain it
Yeah,
in, in a good
absolutely.
way, in a sufficient way.
I think so. So this is a very, very interesting text. The way you showed us how the author of the Gesta used and works the material in Recognitiones and makes it more explicit here and more explicit there. It's, of course, very interesting for broader dynamics on how weird literal text and literary traditions happen not only about characters in the New Testament and apostles and whatnot, but also about secondary figures compared to them, like Clement
Yes, this
of
is
Rome.
something. Yes, this is something I underline in the introduction. The impression is that later the church organizes in a more hierarchical way. So the text necessary change. Here we are in a different state of things, where the hierarchy of the church is not so rigid. So Clement and also Mattidia sometimes are presented as Jesus and the Virgin Mary, respectively. If you read the part about the Clement birth, there Mattidia has the same characteristic of Mary. And for example, she's pregnant, she hears a voice tells her the name of the baby, the voice say this baby will be named Clement. So this is not possible to read for a Christian Catholic public. In my impression is that the public is pagan. So is the Roman pagan that have already the ethic of the first centuries. So another conception of the human being, for example. But they are not completely Christian. And the character of Seneca, in this sense, is eloquent. He plays a very significant role in this fragment. And then
So,
in Recognitiones, he disappears.
so in this sense, the Gesta is riding the wave where Clement of Rome is seen as a character that speaks not only to Christians but also through his education to Jewish speakers and to Jewish subjects and to Hellenistic non-Christians.
Be
Is that the case with this
because
text as well?
sure, because in the um, in the fragment he is still pagan. He becomes Christian as soon as listen to Barnabas. He is the only one who, how can I say, is convinced by Barnabas' word, and then he changed. Before he couldn't find any peace, interior peace, and listen to Barnabas. Listening to Barnabas, he wants to meet Jesus, and not only because he wants to know the destiny of his family, but also because the message of Barnabas, that is longer than in the one in the Recognitiones, makes Clement change in the art. Because you read Clement really worried and sad and tormented, if I can say. And after having met Barnabas, it changed.
And how early do you date this text again?
Excuse me,
How
can
early
you
do
repeat?
you date the Gesta?
This is the matter because Gesta sancti Clementis is the reporting of the Hermagoras letter in Salona, and the attribution to Ezechius is compatible with the data we have from inside the text, but the letter of Hermagoras is earlier. No doubt. So the gesta are from the beginning of the fifth, no, late for beginning of the fifth, because Ezechius, the author says he is a presbyter, not a bishop. And in any case, Ezechius is Bishop of Salona in the first 2 decades of the 5th century. But Hermagoras is earlier, and the letter is earlier.
I see.
In the introduction, I also dedicated a paragraph to one source, one concept of the text that reports to a period prior to the Council of Nicaea. So it probably is earlier, the letter of Hermagoras.
Very, very interesting. I mean, how do you've mentioned the possibility that this text was a forgery, right? Done later by Benya as forgery. Is this something that people have put in writing? Somebody who argued that this text is? Are you responding to an argument that is already formulated, or are you preemptively?
Yes, I had, of course, I had some observation from the editors, firstly. So from
Well,
Emanuela
here in the room.
Principalli, yes.
Yeah.
And this is also the perspective I had from the beginning, the very beginning. Maybe I can list some of these objections if you
Sure.
are
Yeah, it will be interesting because we
listen.
always have that problem.
Um, I think I can start with the most impressive one that is in the very beginning of the prologue, because I don't know if you want me to share the beginning of the prologue.
Sure, if you want.
If I can.
Please do.
I must go back here. Sorry. Sorry,
No worries.
I did something wrong.
Take your time. So yeah, we always have with these new texts the problem of dating them, and it's rarely that we have a smoking gun that helps us pin it somewhere. And when we get all this interval, it can be as early as that and as late as this. And yeah, and it's down to many details, none of them being final
Yes,
argument.
I know it's a difficult, how can I say, it's difficult to follow the speech because there are many information. But the name of Hermagoras is a sign of the antiquity because Hermagoras, as I said, was thought a contemporary of Peter, that is a contemporary of Clement. So nobody, since the 6th century, so nobody would have used this name uh, without saying he was a contemporary. So let me check how can
Please
I
do.
share, because if okay, I'll try to do like this because
The same way that you did at the beginning, just
yes,
Excuse
please.
me, while Marianna tried to search
Please.
the text, I would like to say that the work of Marianna is very attentive, very precise. I could say if Gesta is a fake, a forgery, or original text, but I am convinced that it's very important to publish this text and to propose it to scholars for an analysis. In any case, is a part of the fortune of the figure of Clement, no? As this is very important. In any case, I would say this.
thank you.
I absolutely agree on that. When the gospel, please, do say. Here we go.
Okay, here you see the very beginning of the prologue. The presbyter says ad maiorem Dei gloriam et ecclesiae utilitatem. So ad maiorem Dei gloriam was an expression that provoked the reaction of the editors because of the use by Jesuits of this syntagma. So since all the other data in the text, in my opinion, were speaking about an earlier date, I studied these words, this syntagm, and found that actually ad maiorem Dei gloriam and also ad ecclesiae utilitatem are expression used by many authors from the late antiquity until the modern era, and the earliest mention I found is by Ambrosiaster. So we have, in any case, the proof that is not only Jesuit expression, because it also enters in the canonical use ad maiorem Dei gloriam. So it's an expression, a way to use this expression that is how can I say?
Found elsewhere and earlier than the
Yes, it
Jesuits.
belongs to a style that recalls some authority. So maybe it was used. If my reading is correct, it was used in the late antiquity.
It makes perfect sense to me.
This is one of the objections. Also, it's there is the problem of the very late manuscript, no? And the similar episodes, uh, ambiguous episodes about, for example, finding of fragments of gospels. I mean, other episode that occurred in the history of scholarship. So the doubt, of course, is still pending on us, but for
On
the
this,
moment,
yeah, on this, I agree entirely with Emanuela Principali. I mean, you have to thank you for putting the text available, editing it, with doing all that work, on the basis of which then other scholars will start to judge again on where to best place this text and how and why. But yeah, for until then, we have you to thank for presenting this text for the rest of us. I have again, I have many questions, but if you want to jump in with a comment from the room, don't hesitate. Until then, I'll just throw a couple of them there. You mentioned that he was converted in a way by Barnabas. One of the directions of the project is to look at how these texts are constructed and how these characters, like Clement of Rome in this case, is constructed in the narrative in relation to the apostles that they meet. Is not meeting Peter in this text, it's only Barnabas?
no. Yes, Peter does not appear. And also the plot is a bit different, both from Recognitiones and also from Clementia, because, as I said, they don't go to Caesarea, they go to Jerusalem. There is Pontius Pilate and Claudia Procula, that is a very mysterious character in the apocryphal literature. She is a convert from Hebraism to Christianism in this fragment. So she's very, very interesting as a character. But Peter is never mentioned.
Very interesting. You would expect that to pop in somewhere in some way, and it's not. If we need evidence for why this author does not mention things that are obviously there, not mentioning Peter would be one of them. And I have
Also, sorry,
yes, but no, please,
sorry,
by
if
all
I
means.
can add a little detail, differently from the version we know, Clement does not move rapidly. He takes all the time to prepare his trip to Judea, so he doesn't how can I say, it doesn't go with Barnabas or right after him. And also his trip is very long. He makes some stops because Emperor Tiberius um, gives him some missions to complete before going to Judea. So it's a very different ambientation and plot. This is a detail I wanted to point out.
And a sort of a concluding question. So in your reconstruction of the text, what can you tell us in your reconstruction about the context that produced the Gesta? Why was it composed? To what purpose does it serve? Let's try to finish on this note.
Yes, this is what I tried to underline at the end of the presentation. There is a section in the introduction in the edition forthcoming, devoted to the narratological analysis of the text. The idea is that Gesta Clementis are simply the way in which Christians used to, how can I say, to talk to pagans in the early centuries of the Christian era. And the purpose is to show how the ethics were shared, how the mentality and the conception of existence, universe, humanity was exactly the same. So the scope is to put their mentality in a Christian perspective. And this explains the mean of Seneca near to Clemente. I think the public is a feminine public because the female figures play a very key role. There is Matidia and there is Claudia Procula, that are the two biggest women in the fragment, but there are also Clement's aunt, that is the sister of the father. There is Marcia, that is Nutrix. Sorry, I don't know the name in English. And there are many minor female figures in the fragment. So I think the public of the novels could be aristocratic women of the late antiquity. And also I made a reading of the names of the protagonists, because Clement, of course, he is, and he talks about clementia, that is one of the value of Seneca's philosophy. But we have Faustinus, that is the father, because the names are not the same as in the Recognitiones. And we have two twins brothers. And Romulus and Remus were found by the pastor Faustulus, that is a little Faust, like Faustinus. So it's like Clement is a new Romulus in the way that he refounds the same values of the Roman tradition in a Christian perspective. This is the idea I have. And this is why I think the saga of Clement started at least a branch of hagiographical production, because we find the same characteristic in the hagiographic narrative of Clement and of many others, as well as the tradition of the apostolicity. It all derives from here. This is my opinion.
Thank you. No, this is all very, very interesting. We can only hope for the rest of the texts in the corpus that we're doing in the project that would be able to even contextualize it to some smaller extent. And I would like to thank you again, Marianna, for this paper and for preparing the edition for us to read and work with. And yeah, we're looking forward to this. This is due to appear at some point in 2026, if I understand correctly.
Yes. Thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to discuss with you all of this fragment as soon as the edition will be at disposal. Thank you very much. Thank you, Emanuela Princivalli. And
thank you all for joining.
Dan Batovic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you next time. For
Next
Amber's
time.
See
paper.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
See you next time.
Bye. Bye.